What a beautiful day for us to gather here in our nation's capital with this important mission before us, to rescue our republic. To me, this is exactly what our founders had in mind and what they envisioned for us as a country when they said we must have a government of, by, and for the people. When they made that promise to us of our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are things, as we gather here, we have the state capitol in the background, the White House just down the street, and many monuments paying homage to those who have sacrificed before us, only to be struck in the face with the reality that, unfortunately, our leaders in office today are not committed to our lives, our safety, or our liberty. Now is the time, though, to not be disheartened by that reality, but rather to be hopeful. As you look around you in this crowd, as you know, there are many hundreds of thousands or millions of people who are watching at home here in America and around the world. We find hope in our solidarity together as Americans, gathering from all walks of life, different political affiliations, but gathering together with optimism in the power of our voices in this election that happens in 38 days. This is our opportunity. Because our opportunity is rooted in our responsibility as American citizens to remember that our founders told us that our government exists only with the consent of the governed. That's us. Everything that we are seeing happening now, the weaponization of government entities, the censorship of free speech, the political retaliation against those who have the audacity to criticize those in power. They are throwing everything that they can at us to undermine our democracy because they are terrified of what a free people in a free society will do to uproot them from their power and bring our interests to the forefront once again of freedom, peace, and prosperity. So I hope you feel hopeful as I do, that as we are surrounded by hate, we confront hate with love. That as we are surrounded by darkness, we confront that darkness with the light of the truth and common sense. And that literally, as we are surrounded by warmongers rapidly beating their war drums, we stand strong and speak with clarity and courage for peace. Now, as you know, I've served in the Army now for over 21 years. And so for me personally and for all of our veterans and servicemen and women who are here today, we understand how important the responsibility is that every president has to serve as commander-in-chief. This central responsibility to keep the American people safe, to secure not only our lives, but our liberty, to uphold the rule of law, to secure our borders. And so I'll start here with the unfortunate failures and exploitations that are occurring at our borders. We have some people from California here today. I went and visited your border in San Diego not that long ago to go and see for myself what was happening there. And what I saw was a well-oiled machine driven by the cartels and the so-called immigration industrial complex working directly with them and profiting off of this well-oiled machine. open borders that have been enabled by Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, not to express their compassion as they say, but to exploit those who are coming across our border and being trafficked by this multi-billion-dollar cartel industry. What I saw there were people coming from all over the world, across the border, knowing exactly where to go, not to evade Border Patrol, but to be picked up by Border Patrol, waiting patiently to be loaded in the vans, where Border Patrol have become nothing but Uber drivers for them, where they're quickly processed through a system that often within 24 hours gets them with a free plane ticket to anywhere in the country, often never to be heard from again. What I saw as I stood in a parking lot near a train station where many of these drop-offs occurred were human traffickers who were waiting, women who were being drugged unknowingly, and in their foggy state of mind being ushered into cars, never to be heard from again. What I saw was CEOs of these so-called nonprofits who are working directly with the cartels, with CEOs being paid over $1 million salaries. All of this being done in the name of compassion. But who is the compassion for really? Who really is benefiting? It is the cartels. It is the nonprofits that are making money off of these people being trafficked without a care for the over 325,000 children who are missing, many of whom are likely being abused in our country today, without a care for the over 425,000 convicted criminals who are in our country, illegal immigrants, not a care for those who are illegal immigrants, 56,000 who have drug convictions, 14,000 who've been convicted of burglary, 13,000 convicted of homicide, over 16,000 who've been convicted of assault. This is who they have compassion for. What about having compassion for the American people? For the communities not only in our border states, but in every town and every city across the country that is being confronted with challenges, with increased crime, with less security, with social safety nets being stressed beyond their capacity. When I saw that Vice President Harris went to go visit the border on Friday, we all saw it for what it was. 38 days from Election Day. It's not okay to say better late than never. She doesn't get a pass on this one. But when I saw her give her press conference and her speech that was clearly read off of a teleprompter, word for word, it made me sick, because it once again was a demonstration of her arrogance in lying directly to our faces, that after 3.5 years of telling us that the borders are secure, she stands there and tells us that we have to have rules in place that must be enforced to secure our border, and that she as president will do that. She hasn't done it for the last 4 years. We shouldn't believe her lies that she will do anything differently. She's prosecuted and sued and gone after the governors of these border states who've taken action in the absence of federal leadership to do their part for their citizens to secure their borders. And they're still fighting to do that today. Whether it's the border or just about every other challenge and issue that's facing not Republicans or Democrats, but all of us as Americans, it's clear that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are not interested in solving problems. They're not interested in securing our border. They're not interested in truly reforming our broken legal immigration system. They are more interested in allowing people to illegally cross our borders but will turn their backs on people like a close friend of mine who has served as a Special Forces soldier for over 30 years, who simply wanted to invite some of his family members who live in Italy to come to his retirement, who applied for a 2-week tourist visa and were denied. More of their policies of America last. We need to send a strong message to them that we will not come last anymore. The American people and our country and our freedom must come first. Who we choose to be our President and Commander-in-Chief is a critical decision. It always is, but it is especially critical now. We sit closer to the brink of World War III than ever before. We sit closer to the brink of nuclear war. According to the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, their doomsday clock is set to 90 seconds before midnight. We are one spark away from our demise directly because of the policies coming from the Harris-Biden administration. So it matters very much who we choose as our Commander-in-Chief. Now, President Eisenhower warned us in his farewell address about the military-industrial complex and their cozy relationship with members of Congress and how they are ruining our country and our future. Unfortunately, and I can speak from firsthand experience, that relationship is more cozy now than ever before. The brazenness of members of Congress conducting insider trading, investing in these very big defense contractors just before they send out another $8 or $10 billion to Ukraine. Just the other day, we had the Pennsylvania Governor Shapiro, who flew in President Zelensky on a U.S. military plane, not so that they could stand together and call for an end to the war. No. They instead went to a factory that makes bombs where Governor Shapiro, with a grin on his face, signed one of those bombs. How sick of a state are we as a country when our elected leaders celebrate death, war, and destruction and sell it to us, the American people, as an American jobs and economic plan? This is Kamala Harris's opportunity economy. More war, more money for the military-industrial complex. My first deployment to Iraq was in 2005. I was serving in the state legislature at the time. I stepped down from that seat and volunteered to deploy in a medical unit where I was confronted with the high human cost of war. It was the first time in my life that I had experienced and seen firsthand the war profiteering that goes on. For those of you who served in Iraq at that time, and I hear it's still going on in Europe today, KBR Halliburton remains one of the biggest defense contractors profiting off of war. We had KBR Halliburton logos on our porta potties, on our tents, and on our trash cans. A friend of mine who was deployed to Poland recently said, nothing has changed. Now, who was one of the people that profited off of this? Dick Cheney. Where is Dick Cheney today? Dick Cheney is standing proudly with Kamala Harris, who has said that she is proud and honored to have his endorsement and his support. Now, for the young ones who may not remember, Dick Cheney was the architect of the entire disaster that has been created with all of the problems that we're seeing play out in the Middle East today and other parts of the world. He was the architect of the lie about the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. He was the architect behind the regime change war and the destabilization in Iraq that caused such chaos and loss of life and destruction that created the fertile ground for the rise of ISIS. That is the Dick Cheney who Kamala Harris is honored to have his support. So for those of you who may be at home watching, or for those of you who have friends who are still not quite sure who to vote for in this election, I'll make it very simple. A vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for Dick Cheney. A vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for the neocon warmongers. A vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for the military-industrial complex. A vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for nuclear war. I endorse President Trump in this election because to me, as an American, as a soldier, as a veteran, there is only one choice that is our best hope to walk us back from the brink of World War III and nuclear war, to get us back on that path where we can stand with hope as Americans for a future of peace, prosperity, and freedom, and that choice is Donald J. Trump. You won't hear anyone in the mainstream propaganda media talking about the reality of the threat of war that we face. A war that threatens not only our physical safety, but our liberty and our freedom. Just as we have seen through every major war and conflict before, those in power, those who gain from us being in a constant state of war, exploit that opportunity to take away more of our freedom. And as you know, once it's gone, we never get it back. The Patriot Act was shoved through and rushed through Congress in the days after the terrorist attack on 9/11, passing all of these egregious overreaches into our privacy and our civil liberties, violating the Fourth Amendment, not because they were truly needed because of 9/11, but the national security state saw an opportunity and they took it. And they said to anyone who opposed the Patriot Act, you are a traitor to America if you vote no. Taking advantage of the fear and concern that the American people had during that time of tragedy and grief, here we are over 20 years later. The Patriot Act was just reauthorized once again this year. And rather than the usual rubber stamp that people like Tom Massey and Justin Amash and Rand Paul and I fought against every single time, they took what was an already egregious abuse of our constitutional rights and freedoms and fomented fear yet again of foreign threats to our democracy and our freedom, to take an already bad Patriot Act even worse, to take away even more of our rights and freedoms, and both Democrats and Republicans voted for this. We will not see change unless we hold our leaders accountable to uphold and defend our Constitution that we've all who served sworn an oath to support and defend. The fear-mongering will continue. The lies will continue. Their propaganda will continue because they don't care about the American people. They care about power and greed. Our opportunity is to recognize and acknowledge and speak proudly and truthfully that it does not have to be this way. This is not a foregone conclusion. The purpose for our gathering here today and across the country is to recognize that we have a no-fail mission before us, and it is an urgent mission. Peace, prosperity, and freedom in this country are what is on the line. And now is the time that we must be willing to set aside our differences, perhaps disagreements on other issues, and come together today in the same way that our founders did in the beginning of our country, to stand together on those fundamental principles that are enshrined in our Constitution and our ability to truly live in a peaceful, free, and prosperous society. We must send a powerful and boisterous message, loud and clear, to the warmongers in Washington that we will not allow you to destroy our families. We will not allow you to destroy our loved ones, our communities. We will not allow you to destroy our planet, because we love this country and we love each other. And we want to make sure that we've got a future that we can live in and leave behind. If we stand together on no other issue but this, then we can wrestle power away from the military-industrial complex, break through the gridlock that they have created, close the revolving doors that allow them to exploit their power, and put we, the people, back in charge. I leave you with this. A wise man once shared that we are the spark that will light the fire of change that can restore the vision of our founders, of Reverend Martin Luther King and President John F. Kennedy, where we can stand free and true and proud as Americans. The source of that light, the source of that courage that we will need in this fight comes from love. God's unconditional love, our love for each other, and our love for this country and our future. Thank you for standing with us today. We have 38 days to make change happen. Thank you so much. Aloha. Thank you. Thank you.
Tulsi Gabbard, everybody!
The initial question was why are we in all these wars and who's making these decisions? Well, in 1992, we promised that Gorbachev, when he disbanded the Soviet Union, that we would, after reuniting NATO, East and West Germany under NATO, we would never move NATO even 1 inch to the east. Since then, we've moved it into 14 new nations, 1,000 miles to the east. Why do we do this? Here's the reason why. When a new nation enters NATO, the contract requires it to conform its weapons purchases to NATO specifications, which means billions and billions of dollars, or Lockheed, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, and General Dynamics, and the other military contractors. Who owns all of those? One company, BlackRock. And these are the people who are dictating what the Democratic Party does. They're the biggest owners, and they're moving us into those nations for their good, not for the good of our country. They wanted to go in Ukraine. The Russians said, you promised us you wouldn't do this. You went into 14 countries. Now you want to go into Ukraine. That is a red line for us, and they warned us, not just Putin, but generations of Soviet Russian leaders have said, that's a red line. You're going to force us to respond militarily. Why? Ukraine has a 2,200-mile border with Russia. It's like Canada and the United States. If we put Aegis missiles, Tomahawk missiles in Ukraine, which can be nuclear-tipped, we are 3 minutes from Moscow. We could decapitate the entire Russian leadership in 3 minutes. This destabilized the entire globe. The Russians have been invaded 3 times through Ukraine. The last time they were invaded, Hitler killed 1 out of every 7 Russians. So this is a critical national security interest for them. It is 0 national security for us. We have no treaty with Ukraine. We have no interest in them. And they said, do not go into Ukraine. Well, guess what? We overthrew the government, the democratically elected government of Ukraine in 2014. That is when the war started. And then we announced Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris announced in March of 2022, we're going to put NATO in Ukraine. She went to Germany and made that announcement. 2 days later, Putin responded by invading. He had tried to sign a peace agreement, which everybody agreed to except for us. And then in April of 2022, he tried again on terms that were very beneficial. The only thing he really wanted was to protect the ethnic Russians who'd been, 14,000 had been murdered by the new government that we put in since 2014. And most importantly, he wanted us to keep NATO out. And because he said, you're going to use it for an invasion of Russia. And we said, no, that's not our intent. We just want, we just want solidarity. Well, guess what? That war was never winnable. They lied to us about it. They said this would be like Cuba beating the United States in a war. There's no way they could ever win. Everybody knew that, but we went in anyway. We required them. They signed an agreement. Zelensky signed an agreement with Putin in April of 2022. President Biden, it's called the Istanbul Agreement. President Biden and the Russians were withdrawing their troops. And the only thing they wanted was to protect the people of Donbass and Lugansk, who are ethnic Russians, and to keep Ukraine out. And Zelensky agreed to that. Joe Biden sent Boris Johnson to Kiev and forced Zelensky to tear up the agreement. And since then, 600,000 Ukrainian kids have died and 300,000 Russians. And now, guess what? Zelensky has no way to win this war. His army is collapsing on every inch of the front. So he is losing. Within a year, they will be vanquished. His only solution, what he calls his path to victory, is to embroil our country in a full-scale world war with Russia. So what do? With our encouragement, he invades Russia. This is exactly what Putin said you're going to use it for. And we fulfilled all of his expectations, and that's why the rest of the world supports Putin now. And then we say we're going to give him permission. This is what the White House said. Thank God that the Pentagon brass have revolted and mutinied and said we're not going to allow this to happen. The White House said we are going to allow missiles to be fired into Moscow from Ukraine. Putin said, if you do that, it's an act of war. We will be at war with the United States of America. 2 weeks ago, our country is the only country in the world that has not signed an agreement to not be the first user of nuclear weapons. We've always refused to do that. Russia agreed. China agreed. All the other countries with nukes agreed. We will not use it first. We're the only ones who said no to that agreement. And then we walked away from 2 long-range missile agreements with Russia unilaterally. So we are sending a message to Russia. So 2 weeks ago, Putin changes Russian policy and says, yeah, we're going to use them first. If you have a conventional war against us, we are now going to use them first. And he said he's going to war. The White House wants this. Biden wants it. Tony Blinken wants it. Kamala Harris wants it. The Pentagon went to the White House, the top generals, and said, we are going to mutiny if you try to do this. This is going to destroy the world. Oh, we all need to understand we are closer to nuclear war today than ever been before. Kamala Harris is not thinking for herself. It's BlackRock who's doing the thinking for her, and we cannot afford her presidency. The whole world can't.
Folks, you don't understand what this is going to do to Islam. The majority of Muslims don't know this, and they'll be shocked to hear this, and they'll say you're lying. They don't know this. They'll be shocked. Now here, a leading Islamic scholar, Islamicist, he's not Muslim, but he's a leading authority on Islam, Fred McGraw-Donner. Notice what he says. At the center of the town was the shrine called the Kaaba, a large cubical building with a sacred black stone affixed in one corner. That was the sanctuary to the pagan god Hubal. What are some of the pagan practices that Muhammad adopted? This is Karen Armstrong. They would kiss the black stone embedded in the wall of the Kaaba, which was probably a meteorite that had once hurled to the ground. Oh, so wait, the pagans before Muhammad used to kiss the black stone and Muhammad adopted it? Now we know why the pagans did it. Why is Muhammad doing it? Then she says in that same source, officially, the shrine was dedicated to Hubal, an Nabatean deity, and there was 360 idols arranged around the Kaaba, probably representing the days of the year. Okay, Karen Armstrong, you are not hostile to Islam. You're very friendly to Islam, and you bend over backwards to appease Muslims. And Muslims even invite you to lecture in their meetings, and they praise your books. And you admit that the shrine was officially dedicated to Hubal? Then who is Allah? If the Kaaba is the shrine of Allah, but it's the shrine of Hubal, and you can't have a shrine for more than one God. Here, connect the dots, the necessary logical inference and conclusion, Allah was the name of Hubal, Hubal was the name of Allah. How do you get around it? And even here, F.E. Peters, in his book, Hajj, he says the same thing, F.E. Peters. This Muslim historian says, Amr ibn Luhay, pay attention, where does this come from? Amr ibn Luhay brought with him to Mecca an idol called Hubal from the land of Hit in Mesopotamia. Hubal was one of the Quraysh's greatest idols, so he set it up at the well inside the Kaaba and ordered the people to worship it. Thus, a man coming back from a journey would visit it and circumambulate the house before going to his family and would shave his hair before it, all of which Muslims do. Circumambulate the Kaaba and shave their heads. Here, the source is saying the pagans were doing that before Muhammad. Folks, is it sinking in? Are you getting it? Now, are you ready for the shocker? You thought this blew you away. Did you know that the Muslim scholars till this day have no idea what the Arabic word samad means? That's chapter 112, verse 2 of the Quran. If you read it in Arabic, it says, Allahu samad. Allahu samad. What does samad mean? They have no idea. Samad. Now, here's where you're going to get shocked. If Hubal was actually Baal, pay attention. Hubal was actually Baal, and the Arab pagans knew that was Baal. But in time, the connection became lost and marred by Muslims, by Muhammad and his followers, because they didn't want Allah to be identified with Baal. Then it shouldn't surprise us that certain words connected with Baal worship, their meanings became marred and confused and lost as time went on, as Allah was disassociated with Baal. If Hubal was Baal, and the evidence shows he was, but then in time, Muhammad and his followers tried to disassociate Allah from Hubal, so that the connection became lost, then it shouldn't surprise us that words associated with Hubal, with Baal, that were then taken over by Muslims in reference to Allah, their meanings would be lost too. But if you go back in history and see the connection of these words with Baal, then it would make sense. Guess what, folks? We found an inscription, a Ugaritic inscription with the phrase Baal Samad. Baal Samad, Lord of Samad. And Samad meant club. The Lord of the club, because Baal was depicted with a club in his hand. Here it is. This comes from Franz Rosenthal. Franz Rosenthal, a scholar of Islam. And he's talking about the Muslims being confused over the word Samad. And now he explains why they may have been confused. Let me read. There is enough room for suspicion to permit us having a look at some outside evidence. There we encounter a noteworthy phenomenon, the not infrequent religious connotation of the root Samad. In Ugaritic, that's a place in Canaan, Canaanite worship. Samad appears as a stick or club that is wielded by Baal. In the Kilamu inscription, line 15, we find Baal Samad, apparently Baal as the owner of his divine club. In the Bible, the adherence of the Israelites to Baal of Peor is expressed by the Nepal of the root Samad. So even the word Samad appears in the Hebrew Bible in reference to Baal, even in the Old Testament. The verb that is translated by the Septuagint, hetelusi, the use of the verb doubtlessly reflects North Canaanite religious terminology. From Arabic sources, we learned that an idol of Ad was allegedly called Samud, which brings us rather close to the environment of Muhammad. Now watch this. In view of this material, the suggestion may be made that as-Samad in the Quran is a survival of an ancient northwest Semitic religious term, which may no longer have been understood by Muhammad himself or by the old poets. Did you catch it? Such hesitation is what we'd expect if we are dealing with a pagan survival from the early period of revelation. Wow. Did you catch it? We now have archaeological evidence showing Samad was associated with Baal. Baal Samad, the lord of the club, because Baal was depicted with a club. So Hubal comes from Syria, maybe Jordan, an idol of the Moabites, and the Moabites worship Baal. Hubal then comes to Mecca. He becomes the chief god of Mecca, of the Kaaba. So that means Hubal would be the Arabic form of Baal, either Ha-Baal or Hu-Baal, he is Baal. And then Samad would have been associated with Baal. But when the Muslims purified Allah from his connection to Baal, they kept Samad but did not realize its pagan root and origin and implication. You with me there? Okay. Now, let me read Ibn Kathir. The third line of evidence. Who's ready? From Ibn Kathir, one of the greatest Muslim scholars, commentators that ever lived. This is in my article. This comes from the English translation of Al-Sirah al-Nabawiyya, the biography of Muhammad, the Prophet, by Ibn Kathir. Volume 1, pages 125, 126. Volume 1. Guys, pay attention. Ibn Ishaq stated, it is claimed that when Abdul Muttalib, received such opposition from Quraysh over the digging of Zamzam, he vowed that if 10 sons were born to him, who grew up and protected him, he would sacrifice one of them for Allah at the Kaaba. Allah at the Kaaba. So notice his vow. If I have 10 sons, I will sacrifice one of them for God at Kaaba. Do you remember what the person said earlier? Oh yeah, but Baal demanded human sacrifice. Did you catch what Abdul Muttalib vowed? To sacrifice one of his sons. Oh yeah, but Baal demanded human sacrifice. Did you just catch it? Abdul Muttalib promised that if Allah gave him 10 sons, he would sacrifice one of his sons, a human sacrifice to Allah. Baal demanded human sacrifice. Allah demands human sacrifice. Someone's saying, oh yeah, but you know, and then I said, what do you think jihad is if it's not human sacrifice? Okay, so now notice, Abdul Muttalib promised, if you give me 10 sons, I will sacrifice, kill one of them to you. Okay, now watch here. Watch here. Let's see who's going to see this. Who's going to make the connection? Eventually, he had 10 sons grown up, whom he knew would give him protection. Their names were Al-Harith, Al-Zubair, Hajl, Dirar, Al-Muqawwim, Abu Lahib, Al-Abbas, Hamza, Abu Talib, and Abdullah. He assembled them. Let's see who's going to catch this. He assembled them and told them of his vow and asked them to honor his pledge to God Almighty, Allah Azwajal, and all glorious is He. This is in Arabic, it's Allah. God in English, but Arabic, Allah. So he vowed to Allah. Okay. They obeyed and asked him what he wanted them to do. He asked each of them to take an arrow, write his name on it, and return to him. Now watch this. Remember, he's going to go to Allah and sacrifice. Allah. They did so and went with him inside the Kaaba to the site of their god Hubal, where there was the well in which offerings to the Kaaba would be placed. There, near Hubal, were 7 arrows which they would use for divining a judgment over some matter of consequence, a question of blood money, kinship, or the like. They would come to Hubal to seek a resolution, accepting whatever they were ordered to do or to refrain from. Guys, can you help me understand? He made the vow to Allah. Why is he going to the idol Hubal? And why did Ibn Kathir say this was their god Hubal? And why is he asking Hubal whether he can get out of sacrificing one of his sons? If you made the vow to Allah, why are you going to the idol Hubal? And why did Ibn Kathir say that's your God? The God of Muhammad's family, the God of his grandfather, and his father was Hubal. Okay. Now the tradition goes on to say, oops, sorry, before it dies out. Okay, this is my article. It goes on to say that the lot fell on Abdullah, Muhammad's father. So Hubal wanted Abdullah to be killed, right? But then the Quraysh say, no, don't kill him. Make a deal with your God to see if he'll take camels in place, sacrifice camels in his place. Now watch here. Pages 126, 127. It's lengthy, but I think it's worth me reading, and we're done. So they left for Medina, where they found the diviner whose name was Sajah. So they went to a witch. To ask the witch, how can we appease Allah? How can I appease Allah so I don't kill Abdullah? Why would you go to a witch, a soothsayer, to tell you how to appease Allah? Are you catching this? I don't know if it's sinking in. What kind of God is Allah that would allow Abdul Muttalib to go to a soothsayer, a witch, a kahina, one who contacts spirits, to tell him how to appease Allah? And this is Ibn Kathir, one of the greatest Muslim scholars, saying this. Okay. So they left for Medina, where they found the diviner whose name was Sajah, as Yunus bin Bukayr reported from Ibn Ishaq, that was at Khaybar. They rode off again and went to her and sought her advice. Abdul Muttalib telling her of the whole problem regarding him and his son. She told him, leave me today until my attendant spirit comes and I can ask him. Wow. So not only do you go to a witch, a soothsayer, she says, wait, my spirit will show up. In other words, a demon, a Satan. And that demon and Satan will tell you how to ransom your son Abdullah. And Allah is going to accept it. Allah is going to accept it, folks. Allah is going to allow Abdul Muttalib to go to a witch, a soothsayer, and allow an evil spirit, a demon, a spirit, to tell her how to appease Allah, and Allah is going to be okay with it. Now, what would the true God, Yahweh do if an Israelite went looking for a witch and took the advice of the spirit that inspired that witch to appease Jehovah? What would God do, the true God do? Okay, now watch. Let's keep going. They left her, and Abdul Muttalib prayed to Allah. So he's praying to Allah. Next day, they went back to her, and she informed them that she had a message. How much is the blood money you prescribe? She asked, 10 camels. Okay, and then they says, okay, go back and present your man as an offering and do the same with 10 camels. Then cast arrows to decide between him and them. If the divining arrows point to him, then add to the number of camels until your God is satisfied. Keep doing this deadening of arrows until it points to the camels, not your son. Okay? And once it points to the camels, then you know that's how many camels you sacrifice to ransom your son Abdullah from being murdered. If it points to the camels, then sacrifice them in his place. That way you will please your God and save your man. Please your God and save your man. So they went back to Mecca. When they had agreed to do so, as she had said, Abdul Muttalib said prayers to God, Allah. Then they offered up Abdullah and the 10 camels as sacrifice and cast the arrow. At that point, the men of Quraysh told Abdul Muttalib, who was standing near Hubal, praying to Allah. Hubal praying to Allah. It's all over. Your God is pleased, O Abdul Muttalib. Wait, earlier it says their God was Hubal, and it says as he's praying to Allah, he's before the statue Hubal. Here you go. Ibn Kathir, pages 126, 127. Here. At this point, the men of Quraysh told Abdul Muttalib, who was standing near Hubal, praying to Allah. Arabic is Allah, a God. It's all over. Your God is pleased, O Abdul Muttalib. But wait, who's his God? Is it Allah or Hubal? Because earlier, Ibn Kathir told us this. Look what he told us, Ibn Kathir. They did so and went with them inside the Kaaba to the side of their God Hubal. Hold on. Abdul Muttalib prays to Allah by standing in front of the idol Hubal. Hubal is said to be his God and the God of his family. But then the Quraysh said, it's all over. Your God is pleased, O Abdul Muttalib. So I'm really confused. If his God is Hubal and he's praying to Allah, but he's shuffling arrows to the statue Hubal, and he's before the statue of Hubal praying to Allah, are you trying to convince me that Hubal is not Allah, Allah is not Hubal? Can you help me understand now? Why does Allah accept Abdul Muttalib going to a soothsayer witch? And why does Allah accept a demon telling that witch soothsayer how to appease Allah? And why is Abdul Muttalib going before the statue of Hubal and shuffling arrows and praying to Allah at the statue of Hubal? And if Allah is his God, why did Ibn Kathir say Hubal is his God? What's going on here? What's the conclusion? What's the conclusion, folks? Who is Allah truly? He is Baal, and Baal is another name of Satan. What more proof do you guys need from the Muslim sources when you combine them together that Islam is nothing more than Baal worship repackaged by Satan through his man Muhammad in order to entice the people of God today away from the worship of Jehovah like Baal did during the Old Testament period? How many of you are overwhelmed and shocked by the evidence? And how many of you are now convinced Islam is nothing more than Baal worship repackaged by Satan? How many of you were not aware how much evidence there was to show that Allah is Baal and therefore Satan? Because Baal or Baal is the name of Satan.
Well, a stunning development coming from Capitol Hill. So we are just over 40 days away from arguably the most important election in American history. And now Congress is pushing forward a proposed 28th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. A new amendment right now, 40 days before the election. You can't make this up. It used to be that the deep state forces sort of operated in the shadows. We didn't know what they were doing. And now they're operating sort of right out in the public. Force-feeding information right to our members of Congress and force-feeding it to the Mockingbird media. Congress is openly telling us right now that they are prepping for a mass casualty event in Washington, D.C. Yes, mass assassinations of our members of Congress. I'm talking over 100 members of Congress killed in a single event. They're preparing for it, according to the Washington Post, and now confirmed by Politico. A bipartisan group of congressmen are suddenly concerned about the nation's preparedness for a catastrophic event. They're rolling out a plan for the 28th Amendment called the Continuity Amendment. Continuity of Government Amendment. So get this. They would allow members of Congress to be rapidly replaced in the event that 100 or more of them are suddenly killed. Because when you see these headlines from like the Washington Post and you read these stories from Politico, I want all of you to like go a layer deeper. Like, what's the real goal here? First of all, it's to scare you, number one, right? That's what they're hoping to do, to scare you. Who knows if there's some sort of a false flag? Who the hell knows? Anyway, their main goal is to scare you. And then you want to go a layer deeper and find out exactly what they're trying to do here. So if 100 members of Congress are suddenly killed, no election would be needed, according to this new continuity of government plan. No election. Instead, no voters involved in a mass change of our government. Not at all. No voters allowed. Sound familiar? Like, I don't know, the Obama coup that just removed President Biden from the ticket from running for office again without any voting by Democratic voters, placed Kamala Harris as the presumptive nominee.
Yes.
Sound familiar?
That happened
No
in
voters.
the year 2024.
We had a coup in the United States a few weeks ago. A Democratic coup in the United States a few weeks ago. And they removed a sitting president from the ticket, replaced him with their new puppet. And they did it all without you voting anything. It's amazing, actually. Sounds like something you'd hear about in North Korea, and we'd be mocking it. But no, it happened right here. Right now, the current rules necessitate special elections to fill vacant seats.
Isn't it funny? We think that the Donbass region, they voted to join Russia. They voted over 80%, and they said, and the United States says that's a sham election. The people didn't really want it. We don't, unless we see that everyone votes, then we don't respect it. That's what the Democrats say. Kamala Harris gets 0 votes. Legit.
Right.
Totally cool.
Someone in our chat just said, let me scroll back up here. Says someone, sounds like, Autumn Hill says they sound like they're pulling a Ukraine. Yeah, that's kind of what it sounds like. They're pulling a Ukraine. So get this. This would allow members of Congress to be rapidly replaced in the event that 100 or more of them are suddenly killed. No election needed, no voters involved at all. Right now, the current rules necessitate special elections to fill vacant seats, right? A member of Congress dies in a plane crash, special election. A member of Congress dies in a car crash, special election. America has had hundreds of special elections since the late 1700s. And they're actually fascinating. If you want to actually dive deep into all of the special elections, they're really interesting. Some people just choose not to serve. Like they're elected and they're like, nah, I'm not going to serve. Oh, okay, now we need to have a special election. Others died in car crashes, mysterious circumstances. So we've had hundreds of these over the years. Back since the 1700s, we've dealt with it. But now, suddenly, 40 days before an election, Congress is really focused on this? Red flags everywhere. So America's had hundreds of those. But what has changed right now? What has changed right now, 40 days before an election? Let's put a pin in that for a second. Could it have anything to do with a 2016 study of special elections that the House of Representatives decided to do? So the House of Representatives put out their own study to see how, this was during Obama's time in office in 2016, to see how special elections were carried out. It found that during special elections, the number one factor that determined if a candidate would win in a sudden special election was the approval of the president. So if Trump is hugely popular, then a special candidate would likely win that special election. If the president is hated, then they're likely to lose. So the number one factor for the success of a candidate in these special elections is the popularity of the president of the United States at the time. Pretty interesting, because I guess there's not a lot of other time right now with a special election, so the popularity of the president really drives the narrative here. In other words, if you have a Democrat running and Kamala is president and the country thinks she's a disaster, well, then the candidate likely loses that special election, because according to this study by the House of Representatives, right now we have a 49-day time limit to hold special elections, but Congress thinks that's too long. And they would get rid of that election, and instead, here's how the amendment would work. Lawmakers would submit a list of 5 successors from their own party to the state governor. In the event of a mass casualty incident, hundreds of members of Congress are killed, wiped out. The governor then would appoint one of these nominees as the replacement, ensuring that the legislative body remains operational until they could get their act together and then hold an election. But right away, the governor would choose based on those selections from their party. Okay, no voters needed. You don't need a vote. You don't need voters in this. But here's where it gets tricky. Passing a constitutional amendment, of course, is nearly impossible in the United States. We don't have very many of them, and for good reason. It requires a 2/3 majority to vote in both the House and the Senate, followed by a ratification from 3/4 of the state legislatures in the country. But the bigger question is, why now? Do they know something we don't? Are we facing a mass casualty event that we need to be made aware of? Do you have some information you'd like to share with us on this? Could it have anything to do with the wide open southern borders and the amount of military-aged men that have now come into the United States armed? I'd like to know about this. Are the warmongers in the deep state planning to take us to war with Iran, with Russia? Is that what the Biden administration is trying to do? And the Pentagon? Certainly looks that way. Certainly looks that way. A nuclear strike on D.C. while Congress is in session? Or imagine a State of the Union address when everyone is in the same room, for crying out loud. What are they exactly hiding here? I would love to know. There are no such things as coincidences in Washington, D.C. Why now, with 40 days before an election, are they pushing forth on a 28th Amendment to the Constitution for a continuity of government? You think it's a coincidence? Why is Congress right now doing this? So just so you understand, over the past 15 years, we've seen a number of close calls. AOC, terrified for her life. She was the January 6th. Remember AOC? She almost thought she was going to get killed. She was not even in the building. She was in a totally other building, but she was terrified. In a building down the street. We've seen shootings. We've seen train crashes, right? We've seen all sorts of different things. We've seen 2017, a gunman opened fire at a GOP baseball practice, nearly killing House Minority Whip Steve Scalise. Lawmakers are concerned that illegal guns are coming across the southern border in the hands of gang members that could lead to a mass casualty event. But all of this is moot, right? Because right now, our continuity of government protocols in the event of a national emergency take the power away from Congress, and the president has to put it into this guy's hands. This guy right here is, let me see if I can get my images up here. Next image. I can't find the next image.
Sorry, I can't help you. I'm sitting over here.
I'm trying. All right. No, that's the wrong one. Next image. Oh, well, we'll get the images up later. But anyway, this is Gregory Gallo, a name you guys should all learn. Here he is. He is the commander of NORAD and NORTHCOM, which means that in a continuity of government scenario where national security is at risk, he becomes our leader. The head of NORAD becomes our leader. He basically becomes the acting head of government. He calls the shots. Not Tim Walz, not J.D. Vance. The head of NORAD becomes our leader in the case of a catastrophic event and an invasion of our country. NORAD even boasts about it on their own Twitter feed, talking about how, that's what NORAD does, enables continuity of government operations. And he's in Washington right now having meetings about continuity of government. Okay? It's all interesting timing, isn't it? That's the law. So if Biden dies or resigns, then Kamala Harris becomes president, but not if there's an invasion of the United States. Under the law, General George Gallo becomes our leader. So the timing of this 28th Amendment proposal on the cusp of a major election right now raises some serious eyebrows. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments below, what you guys think about this. Let us know.
Yes, that is extremely troubling, I would say.
I'm struck by the timing of it. I mean, what do you guys think in the comments here? Is it the Washington Post breaks this story? By the way, the Washington Post is a mouthpiece of the CIA and the FBI. We've had whistleblowers from both of those organizations on our show telling us that when they want to leak stories to America, where do they go? They go to the New York Times and the Washington Post to leak these stories.
Yes.
That's what they do. So the Washington Post, of course, is an extension of the CIA and the FBI and the deep state. So is the New York Times. So it's interesting that we're getting this information from the Washington Post first. And then, of course, Politico confirming it. It's deeply, deeply troubling.
I want to tell you about our friends over at the Wellness Company, because they have something now to help you not just prepare for an eventuality or in some kind of emergency in your house, but also specifically for kids. So this is for parents and grandparents out there who've purchased an emergency kit to help yourself out. It's like having an urgent care or a hospital in your own home, including it even has an EpiPen. So you asked for it and they deliver just in time for back to school. So whether you have in your house strep throat, lice, ear infection, the flu, all this unexpected stuff that comes with being a parent and stresses you out, we know it well in this house, and then you really feel helpless when you can't get your little one serious help. And not to mention that you can turn your place upside down, especially if you're on vacation. But luckily, there's no longer a medical gatekeeper with the Wellness Company, because they have not only this emergency kit, it's called the Kids Emergency Kit, hand selected by their board. It also has a 40-page guidebook to have an expert by your side, so you know exactly how to use everything in your kit. I've often wondered this, like, okay, I have these things, but what if I didn't have the internet to look up what dosage or what have you? Then you'd need it printed, right? These are the kinds of things we think about all the time on this show. So ordering this kit is simple. You just purchase the kit, fill out an intake form, and then it's delivered to your door. No more late night pharmacy runs, no more scrambling when your child needs rest. And if one of the scripts run out, there's a replenishment option to restock only what you need. This isn't just a purchase, it's a peace of mind. So you can go to twc.health/redacted. Use our code redacted to save $40 at checkout. Once again, that's TWC for the Wellness Company, twc.health/redacted. The kits are only available in the U.S. for now. Use our code again, redacted, to save $40 at checkout, twc.health/redacted.